Hello BookTube, and welcome to my channel called the Speculative Bookshelf, which is kind of self-explanatory. I will be concentrating on science fiction, fantasy, horror, weird, anything out of the ordinary. And I guess it's kind of a rite of passage for new booktubers to do the BookTube Newbie tag, where I answer 11 questions. And jumping right in then, the first question is, why did you start this channel? Why not? Now, actually, I've got a first channel. This is my second channel now. I've got another channel on YouTube called TED Talk Stamps. That's me, Ted. In fact, my name on the channel is Ted the Talking Stamp Collector. I'm not Ted the Talking Book Collector now. I'm just plain Ted. And I'm having so much fun over there. I've been doing that for 5 years now. And I fairly recently got into the BookTube watching habit. And it was back in July where it finally struck me. I said, man, I want to do this too. I've got a nice little community on my stamp channel, and I've made lots of nice friends who comment on all my videos, and I have a good little community going there. And I thought, well, I'm out here in a country that everyone speaks a different language than me, and even back in the US, I didn't have friends that I could discuss books with. So I thought, hey, this might be a good way to engage with other readers. So here I am. And question 2 is, what are some fun and unique things you can bring to BookTube? Well, all I can say is I just bring me. I'll bring my tastes, my viewpoints, probably from a little bit more senior person's viewpoint or perspective, because I do tend towards older material. There's a lot of classic science fiction, a lot of stuff that's been on my to-be-read list for decades, literally, and I'm just now getting around to them. I'm well into my Social Security period right now, and which is another reason I started this channel. I had to bring down the average age a little bit because we have, Steve Donoghue out there who's kind of skewing it to a higher average age. So I thought I'd bring that down a little bit. Just kidding, Steve. And what are you most excited about for this channel? Well, like I just said, developing a community of book enthusiasts who I can engage with in the comments and just have some good back and forth. Question 4 is, what challenges will be the most difficult for you to overcome? Well, that will be my stage fright. Like I said, my other channel's been going for 5 years, over 160 videos, and I still get nervous sitting in front of a camera talking to people. So that is still a difficulty for me to overcome. Question 5 is, what questions would you like to ask your favorite booktubers? Well, I don't have any pressing questions that I'm, dying to meet a favorite booktuber, to ask. That would be just more of a spur of the moment thing. So that's that. Question 6 is, why do you love reading? Well, why do I love ice cream? It's just something that developed in me from the earliest age possible. And I just love the feeling of, immersing myself in this world that I'm reading about. And, which probably most readers enjoy about reading. You get in that vicarious thrill of, whatever's happening in the story. Question 7 is, when did you start reading? Well, whenever they started teaching reading in school is when I started. I started with the classic old Dick and Jane readers, see Dick, see Jane, See Spot run. Run, Spot, run. And from there, it's just progressed to, the next grade or whenever. We had the Dr. Seuss books. We had a little in-classroom library and had plenty of reading time during class. And I went through the Dr. Seuss books. There's another one. I don't think it's Dr. Seuss. I don't remember the author, but it's called The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins. That was one of my favorites. And then I got into American folk tales or tall tales. I loved reading about Paul Bunyan, Pecos Bill, and all those old folk heroes of America. Question 8 asks, what book or series got you into reading? Well, like I said, the Dick and Jane readers. And actually, really going beyond that, it was probably around the age of 7. I know I have 2 elder sisters, one 3 years older, one 6 years older. So my parents got this set of the New Collier's Children's Library, or Children's Classics. And here's a picture of them. As you can see, it's 10 volumes with each book dedicated to a certain theme. Sports stories, children's classics, stories that never grow old, myths and legends. I just went through those books. I loved them. That's where I learned about Alice in Wonderland. I first read Tom Sawyer in there. I remember the poem, The Walrus and the Carpenter, The Jabberwocky. I was in heaven with that set of books. And also, my whole family were readers, and we often went to the library. I mean, we'd go to the library, and then 2 weeks later, when the books were due, we'd go back and could spend hours, at least an hour, 2 hours, and I'd make a beeline to the children's section, and I would just bring home an armload of books. And somehow the Hardy Boys books just passed me by. They never entered into my orbit. I didn't know about Hardy Boys books until I was fairly old. But I did get other adventure books. I remember one book was called CQ. CQ is a call, a ham radio call, amateur radio, where you put out a CQ, and that's just looking for anyone who's available out there to talk to. Anyways, that was an adventure story. I don't know if they were brothers or just pals, but 2 young boys. They got into some adventure with some crooked types, and amateur radio featured prominently in the story, and that got me interested in amateur radio. And whenever I went back to the library, I checked out books on amateur radio to learn about them. And yes, later on, when the breaker 19 Citizens Band, CB radios, when they became popular in the 70s, I was right there. And another book, I didn't go beyond that, though. I never got me a ham rig or anything. But another book I remember was called Judo Boy by John Ball. And reading that got me interested in judo, wanting to take lessons. That never happened either. Later on in life, as an adult, I tried to find those 2 books. I did eventually find Judo Boy on eBay, I believe. And CQ I never found, because you put CQ in the search box and you just get millions of search results for CQ magazine or anything else with CQ. So I never found a book just simply called CQ. If any one of you know about it, please let me know. Question 9 is, what type of books do you like to read? Well, I read them all. Just about all. Oddly enough, I haven't gotten into the Western genre yet. We had a lot of Louis L'Amour books. No, I don't want to say a lot, but I ran across them, and I never read them. But okay, let's just get to the meat. Like I said, my family was readers. My eldest sister was a huge science fiction reader. She even took a science fiction literature class in college, and she got to meet guest speakers like Robert Silverberg and Harlan Ellison. Anyways, one day I just saw one of her books lying on the couch. It was Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicles, and I remember she had said that she liked that book. That was a good book. And so I picked it up. It looked like she was done with it. I picked it up and I read it, and I fell in love with Ray Bradbury. And I continued to read more of his books. The Golden Apples of the Sun, A Medicine for Melancholy, and I eventually found the novel Dandelion Wine. And there's not too much science fiction in that. It's just more of a 12-year-old boy, his coming of age in the summer of whatever year that was, 32 or something. And just that whole story, his writing, it just enthralled me. And so I loved Ray Bradbury ever since. And I went on to Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. By the time I was in high school, that was a big thing. Instead of Book Talk or BookTube, we had Book Mouth. you would hear about books through word of mouth. Kids who were reading it, they would have it. They would carry the book around at school, and and their friends and other kids would find out about it through word of mouth. So I read Stranger in a Strange Land. I loved that. In 1969 or 1970, I believe, Michael Crichton came out with his first book, The Andromeda Strain, and man, I ate that up. I loved that book. And a few years later, he followed up with another, it was medical thriller, really, The Terminal Man. So to make a long story longer, science fiction from an early age was my reading matter of choice, but I also loved horror and general fiction, going back to the adventure stories that I first checked out at the library. In horror, I'm sure I must have read horror stories as a young boy, though I don't have any particular memories of any particular titles. Probably the earliest that I can definitely recall was The Other by an actor turned novelist, Thomas Tryon, and it's about a boy and his evil twin. And then a couple of years later, he had a follow-up book called Harvest Home, which I also enjoyed. And then in 1974, which I would have been 19 at that time, and I was in the Air Force. I had enlisted in the Air Force. And in 1974, the horror juggernaut came onto the scene. That's, of course, Stephen King with Carrie. And over the next several years, I just read each of his first 5 books as they came out. Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, The Stand, The Dead Zone. I got into fantasy, but more the sword and sorcery type. I got into Fritz Leiber's Fafhrd and Grey Mouser series, the Elric saga, of course, from Michael Moorcock, and Andre Norton's Witch World series. And then I also like nonfiction, especially science nonfiction. In fact, the last few books I've read, Benjamin Labatut, a Chilean author, he wrote a couple of great books. They're actually fictionalized nonfiction books. Those 2 books are called The Maniac And his other book is called When We Cease to Understand the World. And both those books were just totally engrossing. And a couple other nonfiction books are by Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. He had a couple of books that I read. Actually, I listened to them on audiobook. The other one is called Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. And the other one is What Do You Care What Other People Think? And I really enjoyed listening to them on audiobook because the narrator read them so well in such a good conversational voice that I often thought I was actually listening to Richard Feynman. And a couple of times I even double-checked, looking at the image on the audiobook screen to see who the narrator was. And then question 10 is, where do you read? Well, like a lot of the answers you've heard, I'll read everywhere, but I have three standard places, my reading nooks at home. And I'll show you a little video clip here. First, every day my wife and I go walking. We live on the island of Madeira, the city of Funchal, and it's such a gorgeous place. And my wife and I are both, we insist on walking every day. We need our exercise. And so every day we go out and walk around the city of Funchal. And on the way back, we stop in what we call the secret garden, which is this garden here that I'll show you on this video clip. It's actually a garden attached to this nursing home back in the background. It's a retirement home. But this garden is open to the public. And it's a relatively quiet spot. It's not dead quiet because we're not that far from the main street, and we can hear a little bit of traffic noise. And also there's an elementary school right adjacent to here, and you often just hear the kids screaming and laughing and cutting up in the schoolyard. But still, it's a nice, pleasant area. And then when I get home, I have this area. There's my reading corner in a comfy chair with an ottoman. And when I'm lazy, I'll just sprawl out on the couch. And then at night, when it gets dark, my wife and I just like to spend a little time out in the courtyard of our apartment building. And so and here's what that looks like. I'll sit on the bench and just read my book. And last question, number 11 is, what does your book collection look like? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we live on the island of Madeira. 2 years ago, we sold our house in Texas, and we decided to just take everything that we could on in a carry-on and a checked bag and get rid of everything else. We would just start fresh, which meant that I had to get rid of all of my books. I had thousands of books. I was a huge book collector. I collected vintage paperbacks and hardbacks. I was accumulating a library from the Library of America and several other things. The Macmillan Collector's Library, those little miniature books that are blue and they have a little ribbon marker, and plus over a dozen long boxes of comic books. It hurt too, getting rid of my comics, because I had a collection of Action Comics that was 85% complete from the start of the 12-cent era, which was number 283 in 1961, on up to Action Comics number 1000 in 2018. And that's where I quit. So it kind of hurt to see those go. Got rid of all. So this is what's left of my book collection. So here's my book collection right now. In January, on the island, they had the Funchal Book Fair, and here's a book I picked up from local Madeiran authors, some stories. And then on a trip we took earlier to Germany, I stopped at a big bookstore there and found their English language section and picked up these two books. And then I have this paperback, which a stamp friend sent to me. Every year he, for a birthday gift, he gives me a choice of books. So this was the last one I got by Heinrich Kleist. And then I have this book of this Tintin book in Portuguese. I thought I might get that, try to help me learn to speak Portuguese. It hasn't worked yet. But otherwise, my library is Amazon.com. I don't have a Kindle reader, but I do have a Kindle app on my phone, on my tablet, and on my laptop. So I've got I got a big TBR list. So that covers the BookTube Newbie tag questions. I hope you'll like and subscribe to this channel, and by the time you're seeing this, I should have my first real episode up, and it's going to be a top 10 list. So I hope to see you there. So until then, happy reading.